Hello everybody, my name's Colin Joyce. I'm here to give you a demonstration of watercolour painting. Something which a lot of people think is the easiest medium to use, and it can be very rewarding. It's easy to have the equipment, you don't have an awful lot clearing up afterwards, and you can paint in any little corner of a room without leaving any awful smells behind, anything like that. So I thoroughly recommend watercolour painting. You should give it a go. What I'm going to do today is show how you can paint with just 3 colours and produce something in a very short space of time. Although I'm painting indoors here, quite often I'll paint outdoors, and it's nice to take a sketchbook and some watercolour paints with you. So let's just show you what you would do here. Now the name is watercolour, and a lot of students do make the mistake of painting without enough water. So you've got to have plenty of water when you're painting. I'm just going to use 3 colours, just a blue, a brown called burnt sienna, and a yellow called yellow ochre. And that's all you need to paint a scene. Keep your brush nice and wet, lots of paint. Again, people often make up far too little paint for the job in hand. You can wet the paper beforehand, or you can go straight on dry, and I'm going to keep this nice and simple. We'll just start it on a dry wash. Keep making plenty of paint there, just a nice simple sky. You go side to side, you go past the edges of the paper, paint all the way down. I'll pick up a touch of yellow ochre. We'll just sow a little bit of that in the sky as we go down, just to get a bit of warmth. I'm just going to keep on painting down here, all the way down, make that quite watery. Then pick up the blue again and go back in the water. Well, I've pre-sketched this, which you don't need to do. Now, as this is water, I'll just give it a quick push across there like that, and that'll leave a few highlights. A touch of the burnt sienna as well now. And we'll just change the colour on the bottom here. Now this is what you call your first wash, and I'm covering all of the paper. And just throwing a few little marks here and there. So there's all the paper covered in just a few moments. What I'll do now, just to speed things up, is dry this. You can't just let it dry naturally. I will grab a hairdryer and dry that. I'll be back with you in a second. So I'll just dry that quickly with a hairdryer. And the reason for doing that is for speed, and if you want to let it dry naturally, it might take 10 or 15 minutes depending on how wet it is. What you do is use the back of your finger, not your fingertip, and just touch it, and if it's warm it's dry, if it's cool it's still damp. With watercolour you want to paint from light to dark, so these are the lightest colours I'm putting on first of all. I should have also mentioned the piece of paper I've got, which is a certain weight of paper. It's called a 300 GSM, grams per square metre I think that is, or 140 pound weight of paper. You'll see that on labels for paper. And I've taped it down with masking tape just to hold it in place. And that's all you need to do. But you can buy what's called a block, and a block of paper will instead be glued on all 4 edges, but you must finish your painting and tear the block off. Now paint at an angle as well, because you want to let the water and the paint run down. That's now dry, and what I'm going to do now is start to put a few little bits of colour on here. Now, as I say, I'm only using the 3 colours as I mentioned before. That's yellow ochre. The yellow ochre with blue will give you a little bit of green. Also, I'm not painting like this with the little tip of the brush. Use all of the brush. Speed is the essence with watercolour. You don't want to leave it lingering too long. Just let that run along there. That's running down the edge, that doesn't really matter. If you're concerned about paint at the bottom, you can use a dry brush. Just use it like a sponge and just take that away. I'm only using 3 brushes today. We'll make a bit of a background grey for these hills, just a little bit darker than what's in front of the sky, and just painting all the way over these, just to give an idea of the hills in the background. Just keeping this simple, remember, we're not looking to do anything complicated. Now I don't actually need to worry about the castle, because the castle, which is Island Donnan Castle in the Highlands, is actually going to be darker than the hill. So I can go straight over the top of that. Just again using the flat of the brush, pull that along. And just cover up. And one thing with watercolour, you don't go back into it, otherwise you get what's called a back run. So once you've painted it, that's it done. But if you do want to go in with a little bit of colour here and there, you just touch it every now and then, slightly thicker paint, less water, and just let that move around, and that'll just give you a little bit of recession. Just here and there. It's still wet, as I say, as long as I don't put more water in. Just a little bit of colour here and there, just to give it some variety. And just let that run down. If this makes sense, make your brush marks go in the direction that the hills are going to be falling down there. There we go. So we're getting quite a long way along here. Now the water is, you might have noticed with the watercolour, once it's dry, it's lighter when you first put it on. So you actually do want to make it quite dark. I'll take a finer brush now. So the first brush was what we call a wash brush, and this is just a round brush, which is a smaller brush. And I'm going to go back into here with less water and more paint this time. And that makes it nice and thick. And just by mixing the paint on the paper rather than on the palette, and come down here and just throw a little bit of variety in there. So the thicker paint won't run about quite as much as thinner paint. A little green tree there. I'll pop that in as well. Whoops. You don't make mistakes in watercolour, by the way. Whatever happens, you just say that's what it wanted. So I picked up a little bit too much blue, but it's actually worked out quite well in the end. So just add in a few little bits of dark here and there just to give that a bit of variety. Wash the brush out. And again, we'll just use that as a bit of a sponge on the bottom of there, just to pull that out. Okay, now this now needs to dry up a little bit more. In the meantime, we'll go back to the water. I'll just put just a touch of something in there, just to say there's something happening behind the bridge. Okay, so wash brush again. Back into the blue, which is actually getting a bit dirty now, which is what we want. And very quickly rub the brush across the paper in the direction, the horizontal direction. And if you do it quickly enough, you'll miss every now and then, and that will leave little highlights. So don't try and fill everything in. I'll just give you a bit more texture in the water. You could even go a bit deeper than that still. A bit more blue. Touch of the burnt sienna, which will just grade off slightly. And just throw that in there once more. Remember, it will always dry lighter. You watch out for your edges. So again, under normal circumstances, I'd let that dry naturally, but once more I'll nip back to the hairdryer and give it a quick blast just to dry it off so we can continue on. Right, so again, that's just been dried with the hairdryer just to speed things up. With watercolour, as I say, you're painting from light to dark, so you always have to think, what do you want to leave as a light area, what do you want to make darker? And the other way of making things darker is use less water and more pigment. So more water to start with, less water as you progress. So the next stage is to put a few more details in the middle ground. So I'll leave the wash brush down, back to my round brush. So this time I'm going to make a darker tone, and I'll use some of the burnt sienna and some of the blue, which will basically make a grey. And we'll start to put some detail in this little bridge area here. If anybody knows Island Dun and Castle, but there's a little bridge across to that. Now when you paint, don't fill it all in. Leave gaps here and there. And those gaps will give you more interest. But don't leave any light areas at the edge at the same time. You want to be doing that. So we can pick up various, remember we're only using 3 colours here. Technically it's a blue, a yellow and a red. So when they're all mixed together, they look quite green, quite grey I should say. But you can keep adding little bits here and there, individual colours, and just let that blend in there. So a bit more blue with the yellow. Give us a green area, there's a bit of grass in this section here. So you can see how dark this is beginning to go now because I'm using less water. So if you allow that just to blend on the paper. A little lighter there, just to give it a brighter touch. Back to the grey for the bridge. So I want this bit to be quite darker tone, let that stand out. When you're painting, if you can, use as few brush strokes as possible. So just move the brush around the shapes rather than go dab, 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 because that will take you far too long. Try and curl the brush around to get the shape that you want. And don't worry if it's not exact. It doesn't have to be exact. It's painting, it's not a photograph. You know, just throw an extra little bit of blue here and there just to allow that to darken there. Right, so next I'm using the flat brush and hardly any water at all. I'm just using the blue and the burnt sienna to make quite a dark colour. This has to be quite accurate, so as I say, the flat brush is handy for that. We're now moving to pretty much the darkest tones that we want to use. And even then I'll still vary it. We'll put more blue in some places and more brown in others. The more variety you've got, the more interesting your painting will look. More blue on that side there. Not sure how well it will show up on the camera, but it will, when it's dry, perhaps be easier to see it. So you can see in no time at all, things are really taking shape here. And just give that top there, which is the rooftop, a little bit more touch. Now the other thing you can do if you decide it's too heavy, for example, this is a little trick, just a bit of water, just put some water in, and just let that run here and there. Again, that will just give more variety in your painting. Right, so whilst that's playing about, now putting the water in, letting the water run about, allows your painting to create more interest. We can come back over here now and throw a little bit more in there, a bit thicker here and lighter there. Because it will lighten as it dries, as I've mentioned before. Again, just to give it a bit more interest, a bit more colour. We'll come back to the bottom edge of the water here and just every now and then just give that a little darker touch. That tree we put in earlier on, that's quite light now, so we'll quickly just dab with the brush, stick that tree back in there. Okay, we'll just let that do what it wants to do. We'll go back to the wash brush and we'll put some foreground in here now. So it depends if the tide's in or the tide's out, how that looks. So back to plenty of pigment, plenty of water as well. And we'll start to put some foreground interest in here. I'm just making random marks, doesn't really matter what they look like, to be honest. Warm colour here and there, just missing bits out. Imagine this is all bits of seaweed and rocks and you name it, it's all in there. Just don't leave any light parts on the far edges. If you see any of that looks a bit unnatural, just fiddle around with it till it looks better. Without really trying, I'm just making random marks. Things will just appear. Your brain will fill out all of the missing parts. So they become rocks. A shadow under there. Simple as that, you've got something which looks reasonable. Okay, now, still letting this dry up a little bit in the distance, but I'll risk going back into this now with a very thick mix of the blue and the burnt sienna, almost making a black. Just put a little bit slightly heavier shadow in the inside of the ridge there. Just give you a very, very subtle change to that. So this is all quite wet and you can still play around with it and do all sorts of things and just give little bits of shape here and there. Okay. And anything after that is going to be fiddling, what we call fiddling. Fiddling means you've finished, but you don't think you're finished and you want to look for something else to do. And you'll keep looking and looking and looking. And that's when you ruin your painting. What you should really do is do something as simple as that, leave it, call it done. Just a quick mention on equipment. I mentioned the paper before. Always buy the best quality paper you can, otherwise you will really suffer the penalty for not doing that. As far as paints are concerned, although I've got lots and lots of different colours in here, I really do recommend having just a few colours. You don't need all those colours. So today you saw me painting just the blue, the brown and the yellow. I use tubes. I squirt these tubes into the pans. You can buy colours already in a pan and just slot them into a little palette. I just do this by preference, and a tube of colour, if you use artist quality colour, you really get your rewards from that as well, because it's all pigment, not filler. If you buy the cheap paints, it's very chalky, you won't get the quality results. You don't need many brushes. You saw me just use 3 brushes. That's all you need. A big brush, a medium brush and a smaller brush. A bit of water which you can easily carry around with you. Although I make this contraption to sit on a tripod, you can quite happily sit with everything on your knee, and this little palette folds away. There's not too much to that at all. You can get smaller palettes as well. Good quality brushes, good quality paints and good quality paper. They're the 3 essentials to getting a happy result. If you use the cheap paint, you will never be happy with the results. So I do stress that. But you don't have to spend a lot of money. You only need to buy 4 or 5 or 6 tubes of colour, and actually even 2 brushes would do the job for you. And of course water costs you nothing. Little collapsible water pot that folds down into next to nothing. Or you can just use a drinks bottle and just cut it in half and just use half of the drinks bottle as a container. Anything to put your water in. Very limited equipment. You don't need an awful lot. All of that now. I don't wash this out when I've finished. That will dry and that will be used tomorrow in the next painting. Thank you very much.